Hello, Junior 4. Today we're going to continue our reader, Pirates of the Caribbean. So please make sure that you have your reader with you. Today we're going to take chapter 9, 10, and 11. So now open chapter 9 with me, page 36, The Fight for the Chest. And I'll be pausing in each and every part to explain the important parts in each chapter. Okay, so now let's start together, listening to the reader and read it while you're listening, and then we're going to pause to explain.
Chapter 9, The Fight for the Chest. Captain Jack Sparrow sat in a rowing boat holding his bottle of earth. Elizabeth and Norrington were sitting opposite him. Pintel and Ragetti were rowing the boat toward Isla Cruz. "You're rowing too fast," Pintel said to his one-eyed friend. "You're rowing too slowly," Ragetti answered. "We don't want the Kraken to catch us." Jack was nervous when he heard the monster's name. Then they heard a sudden noise in the water, and the two pirates rowed the boat faster. When they reached the beach, Jack jumped out of the boat. He checked that the letters were still in his jacket pocket. Then Norrington followed them. They came to an old church. "Do people live here?" Norrington asked. "No," Elizabeth answered. "Do you know this place?" he asked, surprised. "I've heard stories about it," Elizabeth said. "A religious man came to the island and brought illness and death. All the people died. The man went crazy and killed himself."
Okay, if we remember in chapter 8, we said that the Flying Dutchman, Davy Jones, ordered his sailors to move directly to Isla Cruz because the keys now is with who remembers? Yes, it's with Will Turner. At that time, Will Turner was under the Flying Dutchman in the sea, and he heard the place for the chest, and he knew that the boat is taking him to there. At the same time, on the other boat, which is the Black Pearl, there was Jack Sparrow, Elizabeth, and Norrington. And they were moving also to Isla Cruz. Okay. Now, Captain Jack Sparrow was on the way to Isla Cruz. Okay. One of the sailors said that to the other one, Pinton said to Ragetti that he's rowing too fast, but Ragetti replied that you're rowing too slow. And they're scared to be caught by the Kraken. Jack was nervous once he heard the name of the monster or the Kraken. At that time, they heard a sudden noise in the water. When they reached the beach, Jack jumped out of the boat. Okay. And they reached there. Okay. And he checked if the letters that he put them in his jacket, the letters that Elizabeth was writing to Lord Beckett, if you remember. And at that time, he took them, Jack, from Elizabeth. Okay. He asked his sailors to guard the boat, which is Pinto and Ragetti. And Jack put the compass into Elizabeth's hand because the compass works in Elizabeth's hand. And they walked down. Norrington asked, "Do people live here?" So Elizabeth replied by no. And there was a story about that place. And Norrington was surprised that Elizabeth knows the place. She told him, "No, I heard that there was a religious man who came to this island with illness and death to the people there. And all the people died, so he killed himself. Okay, let's see what happened and who will reach first to the chest.
Elizabeth looked down at the compass and continued to walk. Suddenly, the compass point began to move wildly. "We found the place," she said. Jack drew an X in the sand with the toe of his boot. "Make a hole here," he said to Norrington. At the same time, the Flying Dutchman arrived near Isla Cruz, and Davy Jones noticed the rowing boat. "They're here," he said angrily, "and I can't step on land again for 10 years. "Can we do the job for you?" Bacchus asked him. "I'll punish you if you fail," Jones promised. "Take the ship down below the ocean," he ordered his men. Bacchus called out, "Down, down!" In seconds, the Flying Dutchman ship disappeared below the waves and moved toward Isla Cruz. Pintel and Rigetti were sitting on the beach and looking out at the ocean. The water began to move. Something was coming toward them. They jumped to their feet. Then they ran to tell Jack.
Okay. So here in this part, we know as well that the Flying Dutchman and Davy Jones was moving toward Isla Cruz, but when he was close to there, he saw the rowing boat and he noticed that Jack arrived earlier. And he said that he cannot step on the land unless every how many years? 10 years, exactly, Junior 4. So Makos, which is one of the sailors, asked him, "Can we do this job for you?" So he told him, "I'll punish you if you didn't." And this is a promise that he will punish him if he didn't. And he asked them, the sailors, to take the ship, the Flying Dutchman, down under the ocean. Pintel and Rigetti were guarding the Black Pearl, or the rowing boat, and were sitting on the beach. And once they saw something that is moving in the water or in the ocean, they ran quickly, jumped out, and ran to tell Jack that there is someone near here. Let's see what happened after.
Jack watched Norrington as he made a deep hole in the sand. Jack was worried, and he wanted to find the chest quickly. Suddenly, Norrington hit something. "It's the chest," Jack said, and jumped into the hole. They lifted out the chest, and Jack quickly broke open the lock. Inside were a long white dress, dried flowers, and old love letters. Jack pushed them away and found a box. He lifted the box out of the chest. It was tightly locked, but he could hear a noise inside it. "The heart," Elizabeth said. "It's real." Norrington was surprised. "You were right," he said to Jack. "I'm often right," Jack said, "but people are still surprised." "With good reason," a voice said.
Okay, what happened in this part? Jack was watching Norrington when I asked him to dig a hole in this place when the compass in Elizabeth's hand pointed to the place. And suddenly, while he was digging, okay, he hit something. And Jack said, "It's the chest." And he directly jumped into the wall. They lifted out the chest and they got it out of the sand, or of that hole. And it was closed. Then here is going to be the description. There were a long white dress, dried flowers, and old love letters. Jack pushed them away and found a box. He lifted out the box of the chest. It was tightly locked, but he could hear noise inside it. So on the top of this hole, before reaching the chest, there was what? A long white dress, dried flowers, and old love letters. Okay, that was related to the person or the lady that Davy Jones loved. When he heard the noise inside it, Elizabeth said, "That's the heart. It's real." And Norrington was surprised as well. And he said, "You were right." Norrington said to Jack that he was right. Let's hear the rest. Okay. And then we continue.
The group turned and saw Will Turner. He was running toward them in wet clothes. Elizabeth ran to him. "Will, you're all right." She put her arms around his neck. Jack looked worried. "How did you get here?" he asked Will. "With difficulty," Will said. "But I want to thank you, Jack. You tricked me onto that ship to pay Jones." "What?" Elizabeth said, looking at Jack. "And then I met my father." "That's okay," Jack said nervously.
Okay. While they were discussing many things. Okay. Once someone said with good reason, and that was the voice. When they all turned to look at who, it was Will Turner. He was wet. Elizabeth ran to him because he's the love of her life, And she asked him, he's right. He said, he looked directly to Jack, and he told him. Jack looked first to Will, and he'd ask him, "How did you get here?" But Will said with difficult ways, and he told him, "I know that you tricked me to pay to Davy Jones, but let me tell you something. Because of your trick, I met my father." And Jack was nervous, and he said, "That's okay." Okay, let's continue to hear the rest.
"Everything you said to me, every word was untrue?" Elizabeth said. She looked angrily at Jack. "Yes." Then the happy smile left Jack's face. Will was on his knees next to the chest. He held the key in one hand and his father's knife in the other. "What are you doing?" Jack asked. "I'm going to kill Jones," Will answered. In a second, Jack was pressing his sword against Will's neck. "You can't do that, William," Jack said. "Who will stop the Kraken if Jones is dead? Now, give me the key, please." Will quickly pushed away Jack's sword. He jumped up and took Elizabeth's sword. "I keep my promises," he said, facing Jack. "I'm going to free my father."
Okay, let's see what happened in this part. In this part, exactly what happened. He started to talk. Will, as I told you, he said to Jack that you tricked me, and because of your trick, I found my father. At that time, Elizabeth was surprised and angry. Okay, and she told Jack, "Everything you said to me, every word was untrue. It was not real." Yes. Then the happy face left, or the happy smile left Jack's face because he was angry now. And he showed the key with Will. Will got out the key, and the other hand, he got out the knife of his father's. Here, Jack asked him, "What are you going to do?" He said that he's going to kill Davy Jones. And he told him, "If you kill Davy Jones, no one can stop the Kraken." I told him, "I keep my promises, and I promised my father to free him." So he wanted to get out the heart and cut the heart into pieces so Davy Jones can die. Okay, let's see what will happen after.
But suddenly, Norrington pulled out his sword and turned to Will. "You can't keep the key. Sorry." Jack looked at Norrington and smiled. "You're going to help me?" he said happily. Norrington pointed his sword quickly toward Jack. "No," he said. "Lord Beckett wants that chest. He'll make me a Commodore again if I give it to him." The three men began to fight. "Will," Jack said urgently, "Norrington can't keep the chest. Believe me." Will looked at him. "I don't believe anything that you say," he shouted. "Don't listen to him," Norrington said. "Jack just wants Elizabeth for himself." The three men jumped back and continued to fight. "Guard the chest," Will told Elizabeth. "No, adult men talk about their problems. They don't fight," Elizabeth shouted. But the men weren't listening.
Okay, here we're going to have a fight between three people. Who are they? Will Turner, Jack Sparrow, and Commodore Norrington. The three are fighting for the chest. Will wanted to kill Davy Jones in order to free his father. Jack wants the chest to be to make the ocean for himself. And Norrington wanted the chest to give it to Lord Beckett because Lord Beckett told him, if you got me the chest, I'm gonna make you Commodore again. And they started to fight. Let me show you the picture of the fight. Okay, just a second to show you the picture for the fight. Here are the three men while they were fighting. Okay, this is Jack Sparrow with Turner and Commodore Norrington or Norrington. Okay, here are they. The three are fighting. The key here is in the middle of the sword, and the three swords are in front of each other. Okay, let's continue. And Elizabeth will ask Elizabeth to take care of the box, to guard it, to guard the chest. But Elizabeth said that the adult men don't fight, they discuss everything together. Norrington said that Jack Sparrow wants the chest and he wants Elizabeth for himself, so that's why he tricked Will. Will wants the chest to kill Davy Jones and free his father, as we mentioned. And Jack Sparrow wants the chest to be having the ocean for himself. Let's see what happened after that.
Rigetti stood in the trees and watched the fight. "What's happening?" Pintel asked. He stood next to Rigetti, and they both looked at the chest. Rigetti tried to explain. "Each man wants the chest. Mr. Norrington hopes to give it to Lord Beckett. Then Beckett will free him. Jack wants to sell the chest to Beckett and save himself. And Turner thinks it will help his cursed old father." "How sad," Pintel said. "That chest is clearly very important." He looked at Rigetti, and the two men walked quietly toward the chest. Elizabeth fell to the sand and closed her eyes. "Maybe they'll think I'm sick. Then they'll stop fighting," she thought. She didn't move for a long time. When she opened her eyes, she saw Pintel and Rigetti. They were running away with the chest.
How? Pintel and Rigetti, they took the chest and ran away. Okay, Rigetti was watching the fight, and when Pintel joined him, he asking what's happening. He said that Norrington wants the chest to give it to Lord Beckett to free him and make him Commodore again. And Jack wants it to save himself. And Will Turner wants it to help his cursed old father. Pintel said, "How sad." So that chest is really very important. At that time, Elizabeth thought of an idea that she makes herself sick and fainted. And at that time, they would stop the fight. But when she opened her eyes back again, she watched Rigetti and Pintel, they are running away.
She jumped to her feet. "Shall I tell Will or follow the chest?" she asked herself. The three men were still fighting. She decided to follow the chest.
Okay, here we're done with chapter 9 in this part. She was thinking if she's going to tell Will to stop the fight or she follows the chest. But when she finds the men that they are still fighting, she decided to follow the chest. Okay, so in chapter 9, they reached Ila Cruz. Will Turner and Jack Sparrow and Norrington, they were fighting for the key of the chest. And each one had a will or something that he wants to do once he gets the chest. Now we're going to start together chapter 10, Jack's Big Mistake. Let's see, what is the mistake they are talking about? What is the mistake that Jack will do? Let's check this together. Okay.
Chapter 10. Jack's Big Mistake. The three men were moving across the island as they fought. Norrington pushed Will hard, and he dropped the key. It flew through the air and fell into Jack's hand. "Ha ha!" Jack screamed. He ran away down the beach. Norrington and Will quickly followed him. Holding the key tightly, Jack went into the old church and climbed some wooden stairs. High above him, the bones of the old churchman hung from a chain. Jack said "Hello" to him and continued his climb. Norrington and Will quickly followed Jack up the stairs. Norrington attacked Jack with his sword, but Jack stepped away. Norrington ran at him, took the key, and threw Jack down the stairs. As Jack fell, his hand found the dead churchman's chain. Jack and the churchman dropped down together. At the same time, Will, holding on to a second chain, was pulled up toward Norrington. As he passed the Commodore, he took the key. Then he ran out onto the church roof. On the beach.
Okay. Here, when they were fighting, the three men together, they Norrington pushed Will hard, and the keys were in the air, through in the air. And at that time, who caught the keys? That was Jack Sparrow. Jack Sparrow, when he called the keys, he ran directly inside to the old church, and he started climbing some stairs. And while he were climbing the stairs, Norrington threw on him a chain, and he let him fall down. And also the dead old churchman dropped over him. At that time, Will throw the other chain, and he got the key from Norrington, and he started running out of the church. So now the key is with Will. Now it's with Will.
The water started to move again. Slowly, the heads of Jones's sailors came up out of the pale blue water. The men walked across the beach and stood next to the empty hole. Then they saw Will Turner step out onto the church roof. Will was trying to escape from Jack, Norrington, and now from Jones's men. He jumped across a hole in the roof. Using the point of his sword, Norrington lifted the key from Will's hand. The Commodore held it for a second. Then it disappeared. Jack had it again. Norrington turned angrily and knocked Jack's sword from his hand. He looked over his shoulder at Will. "Excuse me," he said. "I'm going to kill the man who destroyed my life." "That's okay," Will answered. Jack held up one finger. "Let's talk about this, Commodore. Are you sure you have the right man?" Will smiled. Jack was trying to save himself again. "You caught a famous pirate and put him in prison," Jack said. "You wanted to marry a beautiful woman. Who freed the pirate and stole your girl?" Jack turned toward Will. Norrington stopped Jack. "You've said enough," he shouted, and pushed his sword wildly at Jack. Jack threw up his hands and screamed. He fell down the roof, and the key dropped to the ground.
Okay. So after the key was with Will, Will was trying to escape from Norrington and Jack, but now who else reached the place? The sailors for Davy Jones. So Will was trying to escape from Jack, Norrington, and now from Jones' men as well. He jumped across a big hole in the roof, okay, using the point of a sword. Norrington lifted the key. Norrington took the key. At that time, Just it was within hand in a couple of seconds. Then it disappeared, and Jack had this key again. Norrington looked angrily to Jack. It's like, "You're going to get the key?" And he pointed his sword to it, to against him. And he said, I'm sorry." He said to that to Will, "I'm going to kill the man who destroyed my life." And Will was happy. Said, "Okay, I don't care." At that time, Jack said, "Let's talk about this Commodore. Are you sure you have the right man?" Will smiled because he knew that Jack was trying to save himself again. Jack started to say, "You caught a famous pirate and put him in prison. You wanted to marry a beautiful woman who freed the pirate and stole your girl." Jack turned toward Will. Norrington stopped Jack. "You've said enough," he shouted. And directly he pointed his sword wildly at Jack. Jack, he threw up his hand and he started to scream. And he fell down, and the key as well fell on the ground. Let's see what's going to happen after that. Who will be having the keys after that?
Good work, Will said. But sadly, Mr. Turner, he was right, Norrington said. He turned his sword toward Will. Norrington hated Jack, but he didn't like Will either. Down on the ground, Jack picked up the key and ran. "I'm on your side, friend," he called up to Will. Jack slowed to a walk and put the key around his neck. "I'm safe now," he said to himself. Then he fell into a hole in the ground. Will jumped onto a large wooden water wheel on the side of the church. Norrington jumped on too. With a loud noise, the wheel suddenly broke away from the wall. It began to move across the ground with the two men on top of it. Jack was hit by the wheel when he finally pulled himself out of the hole. The key fell away from his neck and caught on the wheel. "I've lost the key again," he said. He started to run after the wheel.
Okay, so here we said that Jack took the keys, okay, from the ground, and he said that he's now safe, and he put the keys around his neck. And while he was running or jumping, he fell in a hole in the ground. At that time, Will jumped onto a large wooden water wheel, okay, and Norrington as well jumped on it. And with a very loud voice, the wheel suddenly broke away from the wall, and it began to move, and each and everyone on it. At that time as well, the key fell away from Jack's neck, and he caught in the wheel. Okay, let me show you the picture for the wheel as well. Here is the wheel. Can you imagine? Here is the wheel. Here it is. Okay. Let's continue together what happened as well.
Elizabeth finally reached Pintel and Ragetti in the trees. "Hello, love," Pintel said and smiled. He and Ragetti put down the chest and pulled out their swords. Elizabeth reached for her sword, but it wasn't in her belt. Will had it, she suddenly remembered. The two pirates attacked her, but suddenly something crashed through the trees. They turned and saw the water wheel. Jack was running behind it. Pintel and Ragetti turned back to Elizabeth, but then a knife hit a tree next to Ragetti's head. Jones's men were coming. Pintel and Ragetti dropped their swords at Elizabeth's feet, took the chest, and started to run. With a sword in each hand, Elizabeth ran through the trees behind them. The pirates tried to run around a tree, one each side of it, but they were holding the chest between them. As they stopped, Jones's men arrived. Ragetti, Pintel, and Elizabeth looked at the chest and then at the terrible sailors. They all made the quick decision to leave the chest on the ground.
Okay, in this part, Elizabeth was, we know that she was running, chasing the chest and running after Pintel and Ragetti. When Pintel and Ragetti saw her, they took out their swords. But she tried to catch her sword, but she remembered that her sword is with Will Turner. And while they were talking and they wanted to fight, at that time, what happened? They heard a very big noise, and that was the wheel, and Jack was running after it. And as well, when they took the decision to escape, and they throw their swords to Elizabeth's feet, she started to run after them and to chase as well the chest. At that time, Jones' men as well appeared. And the decision was they have to take a decision. So they were looking at the chest, and the decision was that to keep the chest on the ground. Let's see what happened after.
On another part of the island, Jack was still running after the wheel and the key. He ran quickly, got close to the wheel, and jumped inside it. Will reached down from the top of the wheel. He took the key before Jack could. Then he also jumped inside the wheel. Norrington followed him quickly. Cutting Will with his sword, Jack took the key again. He climbed Jack reached for a piece of wood and threw it at the sailor's head. The wood shoulders. Jack jumped out of the tree and looked around. He couldn't see anybody. With the key in hand, he carefully walked up to the chest.
Okay. On the other part of the island, we know that Jack was still running after the wheel, and who was on the wheel? There was Will Turner and Commodore Norrington. Will reached down from the top of the wheel. He took the key before Jack could. And then he also jumped inside the wheel. So Norrington followed him quickly. So inside the wheel now, like this picture you're going to see now, just a second to show it to you. Okay. They are inside the wheel. The three of them, they are now inside the wheel. And who has the key? It's Will Turner. Okay. Norrington followed him quickly, cutting Will with his sword. Jack took the key again. So now the key went from Will to Jack. And he wanted to climb on the top of the wheel and then jumped into a tree. At that time, Jack noticed that there is one of the sailors of Jones. The hook knocked and the undead sailor's head off his shoulders. Jack jumped out of the tree and looked around. He couldn't see anybody. With the key in hand, he carefully walked up to the chest. Okay, so the key now is with Jack, and Jack's trying to reach the chest. Okay, let's know how happened after. Okay, let's listen to the rest of chapter 10.
Jack sat down next to the chest and turned the key in the lock. And there it was, Jones's heart. Taking off his shirt, he put the heart inside it. Then he looked around again. Nobody was watching him. He ran straight to the rowing boat and found his bottle. It was large enough and had a wide top. He emptied some of the earth onto the beach and placed the covered heart inside the bottle. Then he filled the bottle with sand. He looked up when he heard a sudden noise. Pintel, Ragetti, and Elizabeth ran out of the trees. The two men were carrying the chest again, and Jones's sailors were close behind them. Elizabeth fought Jones's men bravely, but she was losing the fight. Then the big wheel crashed out of the trees and knocked down some of Jones's men. Elizabeth escaped to Pintel and Ragetti, and they pulled the chest through the sand toward the rowing boat. Jack was unhappy. There were too many people on the beach. He put his bottle back into the end of the rowing boat and watched. The wheel finally stopped near the water, and Will and Norrington climbed out. Norrington fell into the rowing boat. He lifted his head, saw Jack's bottle, and reached toward it. Jack watched carefully. Then Norrington's hand moved past the bottle and reached for the letters in Jack's coat pocket. Jack didn't stop him because he didn't need the papers now. He had the heart. Davy Jones and every ship on the ocean were his.
Okay. To this point, what happened? Jack took the heart out of the chest and he put it in his water, in his bottle, the bottle that he took from Tia Dilma, that had the earth sand. He threw some of them and then put the heart and then put another sand inside it and went to his rowing boat. No one was seeing him. At that time, Ragetti and Pintel and Elizabeth was pulling the chest to the rowing boat, and the sailors, or Davy Jones' sailors, were behind them, and Elizabeth started to fight with them, but she was losing the fight. Once the wheel crashed some of them, okay, and Will Turner and Norrington went out of the wheel to the beach. Jack wasn't that happy because there were a lot of people on the beach, but now he has the heart. Norrington reached the rowing boat, or he fell inside the rowing boat, and he was moving to reach Jack Sparrow to take from him the letters that Elizabeth wrote for Lord Beckett. Here, he didn't care for the letters anymore in the coat pocket because he didn't need the papers now. He has got what? The heart, Davy Jones' heart. And now every ship on the ocean is going to be his. Okay, let's see what happened.
The fight on the beach between Sparrow's men and Jones's men continued. Suddenly, Will noticed the chest. The key was in the lock, and he started to open it. Jack quickly turned around and hit him, and Will fell. Elizabeth ran to his side and looked down at him. "We're not going to escape," she said to Norrington. "Not with the chest," he replied. He quickly took the chest and ordered her into the boat. "Don't wait for me," he called as he disappeared from the beach into the trees. Jones's men followed him. "We must listen to him," Jack said quickly. "Yes," Pintel agreed and pushed the rowing boat into the water. Jack picked up his bottle. With the heart and Tia Dalma's earth inside it, he was safe. "We have to take Will," Elizabeth ordered. Jack looked angry, but agreed. Pintel and Ragetti pulled Will into the boat. Without another word, they left the island and Norrington behind.
So they were still thinking that the heart still is in the chest. Will saw the chest and the key inside the lock. He was moving to open the chest. At that time, Jack hit him and he fell. And Norrington said, "We're not going to escape." "Not with the chest," he replied, and he quickly took the chest and ordered her into the boat. "Don't wait for me." And he disappeared, and Jones's man was following Norrington. And Jack said we must listen quickly to him. Pintel agreed for this and took Elizabeth as well, but Elizabeth ordered that still we need Will with us. So they pulled Will on the boat, and as well, Jack now is safe because he have the earth sand, which Teddy Elmas gave him, and he have the heart of Davy Jones. Here, chapter 11 is the end of Captain Jack. Let's see what happened in chapter 11. Do you think who's going to keep the heart with him? Who's going to have the heart? Let's see.
Chapter 11. The end of Captain Jack. Jack's men were soon back on the Black Pearl. Will slowly opened his eyes. What happened to the chest? He asked. Norrington took it. Jones's men followed him, Elizabeth told him. Gibbs came and welcomed them all onto the ship. He was ready to sail. Jack, he said, we saw the Dutchman an hour ago. She was coming around the end of the island. Was she? Jack replied. He didn't seem worried. The most dangerous ship on the ocean is too close to us, Gibbs called to the other sailors. Pull up the sails. Jack felt no need to hurry. He sat down and held his bottle tightly to him. Gibbs, is your mouth dry? He asked. Is your heart moving quickly in your chest? Yes, Gibbs answered.
Okay. Here they reached the Black Pearl. Gibbs was waiting for them, and he welcomed them all back on Black Pearl. And he told Jack that they saw the Dutchman around here an hour ago, the Flying Dutchman, and that means that the Flying Dutchman is around them. And he ordered the other sailor to sail quickly, but Jack wasn't that worried, and he said that no need to hurry. Okay, because he has the bottle that has the heart and the earth sand, and he was feeling comfortable putting the bottle close to him. And when he opened his eyes, he asked about the chest, and they replied that the chest is now with Norrington, and Davy Jones' men are following him. Okay, here Jack asked Gibbs a question. He asked him, Gibbs, is your mouth dry? Is your heart moving quickly in your chest? Yes, Gibbs answered. Let's see, why did he ask him those questions?
I think you're afraid, Jack told him. Well, aren't you afraid too? Gibbs said. He didn't understand Jack. Where was the frightened captain of only a few hours before? Elizabeth walked across the ship to the two men. She agreed with Jack. We're in no danger, she said to Gibbs. I can't see any ships. She spoke too quickly. As they watched, the ocean began to move. Suddenly, the Flying Dutchman came up from below the water and stopped next to the Pearl. Jack turned toward the Dutchman and lifted the bottle above his head. He pointed to it, smiled, and gave a friendly wave. On the Dutchman, Davy Jones realized what he meant. He's got my heart. He turned to Macus. Prepare the guns, he said. We're here. Yoo-hoo! Let's talk, Jack shouted. What are you doing? Gibbs asked angrily. Be quiet, Jack replied. He lifted the bottle again. I have the heart in here, he said quietly. Really? How? Gibbs asked. Jack smiled. I'm Captain Jack Sparrow, remember? Nobody is smarter than me. Gibbs knew very well.
Okay. So in this part, what's happening exactly? Davy Jones have got the heart. Jack Sparrow have got the heart in the bottle. While they were talking, he told Jack Sparrow told Gibbs that you're afraid. Gibbs started to ask while not understanding Jack Sparrow. Well, aren't you afraid too? Where is the afraid man that a couple of hours ago or a few hours ago, he was really afraid. Okay. So here, who started to talk? Who started to talk? Elizabeth. And she said, yes, he's not afraid anymore because there's no one around us and the Flying Dutchman is not around us. Okay. But no, the Flying Dutchman appeared. At that time, who started to talk? The happy man, Jack Sparrow. Now he has the heart. So he raised up his bottle in the air over top of his head, and he showed it to Davy Jones. Davy Jones at that time knew that Jack Sparrow had got what? His heart. That he got his heart. And he started to feel angry. And he ordered Macus to make the guns ready. And he started to say, we're here. Yoo-hoo, let's talk. Gibbs was like very angry and started to ask Jack, what are you doing? He told him, be quiet. He lifted the bottle again. I have the heart in there. He said quietly. Okay, let me show you the picture when he was raising the bottle. Here it is. Look at the picture. Here's the bottle that has the heart and the earth sand as well. Okay. Gibbs knew very well that Jack wasn't always right. Okay, ask him, how did you get it? Jack smiled. I'm Captain Jack Sparrow. Remember, nobody's smarter than me. Let's see what will happen after that.
Wasn't always right. I have to protect the ship, he said, and shouted, move to the left. Hurry, men. The Black Pearl sailed away from the Dutchman. The Dutchman's guns began to shoot, but the Pearl was escaping. Can the Black Pearl move faster than the Dutchman? Will asked. That isn't a natural ship, Gibbs said, pointing to the Flying Dutchman. It can sail into the wind and not lose speed. That's how it catches other ships. But if the wind is behind us, we can move faster than her, Will said. Suddenly, he understood Gibbs's plan. Yes, Gibbs said. The Black Pearl is the only ship that Davy Jones fears. Jack smiled and held his bottle close to his chest.
Okay. So here, Gibbs knew that not every time Jack is right. So he said that they have to start sailing quickly away from the Flying Dutchman. Will was surprised how the Black Pearl is faster than the Flying Dutchman. But Gibbs informed him that it isn't a natural ship. He said this and pointing to the Flying Dutchman. It can sail into the wind and not lose speed. That's how it catches other ships. But if the wind is behind us, we are going to fall to be faster. Here, Will started to think and understood Gibbs' idea or Gibbs' plan. Okay. Jack started to smile back again. He held the bottle to his close to his chest, and he said, "We can take the Dutchman." We said to Jack, "We can run and turn and fight." Let's hear what's going to happen after that.
We can take the Dutchman, Will said to Jack. We can turn and fight. Or we can run away, Jack answered brightly. You have the only ship that can take the Dutchman in a fair fight. But I don't like to fight fairly, Jack said. Suddenly, the Black Pearl moved to one side and sailors fell to the floor. Jack's bottle was knocked from his hands and broke. Sand and earth went everywhere. Jack fell to his knees and looked through it. There was nothing in there except sand. Jack looked up at Gibbs. I don't have the heart. Then who does? Gibbs asked. Jack turned pale. He didn't have Jones's heart, and he didn't have Tia Dalma's earth. The Pearl stopped moving, and Elizabeth looked out at the ocean. Have we hit some rocks? She called. I heard those words on the Edinburgh Trader, remembered Will. No, he shouted. It's not rocks. Move back. What is it? Elizabeth asked, seeing the fear in Will's eyes. The Kraken, Gibbs said. It's coming for Jack. The men on the Pearl were silent. Jack stopped looking through the sand on the floor of the ship. The heart wasn't there, and the black mark was on his hand again. Very quietly, Jack moved toward the end of the Pearl. None of his men saw him climb into a small boat. He rowed quickly away from his ship. The water around the Pearl began to move as, slowly, the Kraken came up out of the ocean.
Okay. We know the last part, or we knew that Jack had the bottle. At that time, while they were running away, okay, what happened? The black pearl moved to one side, and the sailor fell on the floor, and as well the bottle of Jack fell and it got broken. But he didn't find, unless the sand, he didn't find the heart. So where's the heart? Jack looked at Gibbs and he said, I don't have the heart. So Gibbs asked, then who does? He started to feel pale again. Joe's heart is not with him anymore, and Theodelma's earth sand was not with him as well. Okay, he saw that they hit in a rock, or Elizabeth saw that, but Will said, I heard those words on the Edinburgh Trader. No, he shouted, it's not rocks, move back. Gibbs replied, the Kraken. This is the Kraken. It's coming for Jack. The men of the Pearl were silent and they were talking. At that time, what happened? Jack moved toward one of the rowing boats and he took it and he rowed away quickly from his ship. And the water around the Pearl began to move as slowly the Kraken started to come up from the ocean. Well, they are going to die. Will and Elizabeth and Gibbs and all of that were going to die by the Kraken. Let's see.
Go to the guns, Will shouted. Protect the ship. The pirates quickly prepared for the monster's attack. The Kraken's long arms moved onto the ship, but the guns were ready. Will ordered the men. It broke all the ship's small rowing boats as it went down. It will return, Will shouted. Turning to Elizabeth, he said, get off the ship. There are no boats, Elizabeth replied. The Kraken destroyed all of them. Not all of them. As the Kraken prepared to attack again, Jack rowed away more quickly. But something stopped his escape. When he looked down at his compass, it was pointing toward the Black Pearl and his men. Sadly, Jack began to row back again. On the Pearl, the Kraken was winning the fight. The pirates shot at it repeatedly, but they couldn't stop it.
Okay. So here we said that the Kraken started to come out from the ocean. So Will started to shout, use your guns and protect the ship. The pirates quickly prepared to attack the monster or the Krakens, but the Kraken's long arms moved onto the ship, but the guns were ready. Will ordered the man to shoot the monster. Badly hurt, the Kraken moved away. But it broke all the ship's small rowing boats as it went down. He looked to Elizabeth. Will looked at Elizabeth and he asked her to get off the ship. She told them there are no boats. The Kraken destroyed all of them. Not all of them. As the Kraken prepared to attack again, Jack was rowing away more quickly, but something stopped him. When he looked at his compass, the compass was pointing back again to the Black Pearl and to his men. And he started to go sailing back, or to row back again to the Black Pearl. On the Black Pearl, for sure, the Kraken was winning the fight. And the pirates starting to shoot more and more and more, but they couldn't stop the Kraken. Okay, let's see what happened after that.
Elizabeth stood in the captain's room with a gun in her shaking hands. She was very angry. Jack has disappeared, she said to herself. He's the person that the Kraken wants. He brought us into this mess. Then, as the Kraken's arms moved slowly through the windows toward her, she dropped the gun. She ran up to the top of the ship and into Jack. He was back. We have some time. Leave the ship, he ordered. Can we really escape in a rowing boat? Will asked. We can return to the island. We can escape while the Kraken takes down the Pearl. Jack's eyes showed his sadness at the thought of the end of his ship. Will, Gibbs, and the other pirates went toward the rowing boat. Thank you, Jack, Elizabeth said softly. She moved closer to him. You came back. I always knew that you were a good man. She kissed the pirate, then stepped back slowly. There was a sharp noise. Jack looked down at his hands. I've chained you to the side of the Pearl, Elizabeth explained. The Kraken wants you, not the ship, and not us. You're a great pirate, Jack said. Elizabeth looked at him for the last time and remembered so much and so many adventures. Then she ran off the ship and left Jack waiting. Slowly, the Kraken's arms moved onto the Pearl, and the monster's head moved toward Jack. Its mouth was open, and in its teeth was Jack's lost, much-loved hat. He took it out of the monster's mouth and placed it on his head. Hello, monster, he said. From the rowing boat, the pirates of the Black Pearl watched the Kraken and Jack fight. Slowly, the terrible monster covered the ship with its body. Then it pulled the ship and Jack down below the waves. Davy Jones stood on the Flying Dutchman and smiled. Jack Sparrow, he said happily. Now I have you. Jones was not the only person watching from the Dutchman. As Jack went down with the ship, Bootstrap Bill watched the water too. Sadly, he remembered Jack Sparrow, Captain Jack Sparrow. We thought you could do it, he said quietly. Only you. The Black Pearl and her captain were gone. And already the world seemed a darker place without them.
Okay. Here in this part, while the Kraken was fighting or was attacking the Black Pearl, Elizabeth was in the captain's room with a gun. And she said in a very angry way that Jack has disappeared. He's the person that the Kraken wants. He brought us into this mess. This is what Jack did. Then as the Kraken arms started to move slowly, Jack returned back to the ship and he wanted to take the sailors and Will and Elizabeth as well. Will Gibbs and the other pirates went toward the rowing boat. Elizabeth moved slowly to reach Jack and she told him, thank you. And she moved closer to him. You came back. I always knew that you were a good man. Here she kissed him, and as well, she she chained his hand into the side of the pearl, and she told him, "The Kraken wants you, not the ship and not us. You're a great pirate," Jack told Elizabeth. Elizabeth looked at him for the last time because she knew that he would not survive anymore. And then slowly the Kraken's arms started to move on the pearl, and they started to take Jack and the Black Pearl down under the ocean. Who was that happy at that time? Davy Jones. He was standing on the Flying Dutchman, and he's happy and smiling and said, "Jack Sparrow, now I have you." But not Jones only was watching, as well Bootstrap Bill was watching the water. And he remembered Jack Sparrow, Captain Jack Sparrow. And he said to himself, "I thought that you can do it. Only you." The Black Pearl and her captain were gone, and already the world seemed a darker place without them. Okay, we're done with the reader. Okay, here are the links for chapter 9, 10, and 11. Watch them, watch the videos. You will enjoy them. They are really, really enjoyable. Thank you, and I wish you a good day. Bye-bye.